Well, welcome everybody to another spiritual reflection for Franconia Mennonite Church. So I was online the other day and I saw a friend of mine posted something on social media. They posted something to the effect of, I'm feeling a little bit down. I'm feeling a little bit discouraged. Can y'all help me out? Can you send me some spiritual encouragement, some uplifting verses to sort of pick me up because I'm feeling a little down, specifically related to the COVID-19 situation that we're in. And so people were responding to that. People were submitting different verses, different kinds of encouragement. And what caught my attention was one person submitted a verse, Jeremiah 29:11. And this is a really well-known verse. This is a verse that you may possibly know. It may be a favorite verse of yours. You may have this verse memorized because it's very common and well-known. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And so somebody shared that verse with my friend, and my friend responded by saying, yeah, just how meaningful that was. That's exactly what she needed to hear. And that verse gave her the encouragement and the assurance that she needed, that this whole thing was going to be over soon, that God is in control, and things were going to return to normal quickly because of the assurance of that verse. And it struck me because I certainly affirm that God can bring good, beautiful, redemptive things out of difficult situations. But that verse has always been a little curious to me. I have said before that I think that is perhaps the verse in the Bible that's taken out of context more than almost any other. And so I was reflecting on that for a couple days and just kind of want to share a little bit with you how I think that verse might actually offer some spiritual encouragement to us, but perhaps not in the way we immediately assume. So just kind of as a reminder, here's what's happening in the midst of Jeremiah 29. That verse comes from Jeremiah 29. In the book of Jeremiah, at this point in the book of Jeremiah, God's people have been taken into captivity. So just to kind of back up in the story a little bit further, God's people are rescued from slavery in Egypt. God leads them through the wilderness. They enter into the promised land, this land that God has for God's people. At a certain point, though, the people stop being faithful to God, and the people are invaded by a foreign power. The Babylonian Empire comes and invades them, kills many of the Israelites, and the Israelites who are not killed are taken into captivity. The Babylonian army takes all of these people, marches them hundreds of miles back to Babylon, and holds them in captivity. This is referred to as the exile. Now, there was a very small group of Israelites who remained, called the remnant, but most of the people were in captivity in Babylon. And so just think about that. Here are these people who are experiencing a major disruption to their way of life. Things are not happening the way they desired. And the people there in Babylon in captivity, their hope, their prayer, their desire is for this current disruption to end and for things to go back to normal as soon as possible. They were praying for God to intervene. They were praying for God to rescue them. They were praying for this major disruption in their lives to end so that things could go back to normal as quickly as possible. So in the midst of that, there are a few prophets who speak up, and they speak into the situation that the people in captivity are in. Unfortunately, not all of those prophets are actually speaking God's truth. Some of them are false prophets. One of those false prophets that we read about in the book of Jeremiah is the prophet Hananiah. And so Hananiah speaks up, and Hananiah says to the people, guess what? I've got good news. The word of the Lord is that this whole thing is going to be over quickly. And Hananiah actually says that the Babylonian Empire is going to fall within 2 years, and you will return to your former life. Now, 2 years is still a long time, but in that context, this was actually a really short period of time for an entire empire to fall. And so Hananiah speaks up and he says to the people, good news, this disruptive situation is going to be over quickly and things will be back to normal before you know it. Unfortunately, that was not actually the word of the Lord. And so what we see soon after that is the prophet Jeremiah speaks up, and Jeremiah says to the people, don't get your hopes up. Don't buy into that false hope. The word that Hananiah has spoken is not the word of the Lord. In fact, because he spoke a false prophecy, Hananiah is going to die. And so Jeremiah says to the people, listen, it's not going to be 2 years. It's going to be much longer than that. It's actually going to be 70 years that you are in captivity. And so he writes a letter to these people and says, here's what's really going to happen. And so the promise that we pull out of there from Jeremiah 29:11, that is in the context of this larger letter that Jeremiah writes to the people in captivity. And listen to what Jeremiah says. So picking up in verse 4, it says, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to those I carried into exile in Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Now, right off the bat, if you were the people living in captivity, this is not what you want to hear. It's like, wait a minute, why is God telling us to settle down? Why isn't God coming to rescue us? Why would we build houses here? This isn't our home. This is not the new normal. We don't want to get used to this disruption. We don't want to make the best of it. We want it to end. The letter continues, verse 6. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Well, this is now getting worse for the people. God says, have sons and daughters. Have your sons and daughters have sons and daughters? Are we going to be here long enough that our kids start having kids? This is not what we were hoping for. Oh yeah, it gets worse. Verse 10, this is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for you in Babylon, then I will come and fulfill my good promise to you and bring you back to this place. So again, Hananiah was saying, no sweat. This is going to be over in 2 years. Jeremiah comes along and says, listen, it's not going to be 2 years. It's going to be 70 years. And so settle in, get used to it, build homes, plant gardens, have families, because you're going to be in exile longer than you wanted. You're going to be in this period of disruption longer than you wanted. We're not going to go back to how things were for longer than you wanted. And it is in that context that we then get this verse in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. So understand, this verse is not this sort of blanket promise that when we are in periods of disruption, God is automatically going to come quickly and rescue us from that and take us back to how things were. Actually, this verse reminds us that even in periods of exile, even in periods of disruption, even in periods where things are not going the way we wanted, that God still has a plan for us. God can still work in our lives. God is still in control, even during those seasons. And so I just remind us of that today. I'm not saying that we're going to be in the midst of this pandemic for 70 years. I don't know how long this is going to last. I think for all of us, we would acknowledge it's already gone on longer than we would like, and it's probably going to continue to go on for longer than we would like. But the spiritual encouragement I would offer to you today is, let's look toward the future with hope and with anticipation, and let's joyfully be expectant about what it will be like when we can get back together again. That's fine and that's good. But I also don't want us to miss the fact that even in periods of exile and disruption, God can still work. And so let us be open to, let us be aware of, let us be seeking the ways that God is working right here, right now, in the midst of this moment of disruption. Let's do that together, trusting that God will show us ways that God is still at work and in control. May it be so.